Yeah, so Prey, we both just flew back in from the dirty South. I was there for an event that, I mean, let's just say that I put the fun in that funeral. Know what I mean?
I know what you
know
mean.
what I mean?
I know what you mean, but honestly, you were trying to slide around the word funeral by calling it an event, and then you just went up and did the whole fun funeral thing.
I mean, that's too good of a pun to not make.
Done before, but yeah, I mean, I also came back from NC, similar event. So NC, let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah. Petey Pablo.
We do like to raise up and take our shirt off and twist around our hair like a helicopter.
Like a helicopter? In the fashion of a helicopter?
Yep.
Oh,
and
man.
you gotta do it right. You gotta do it the left way.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta spin on from the left.
Yeah, that's fun, dude. Yeah, I just was back there just hearing my my New Orleans family just being like, yeah, just shoot off your gun every now and then, keep the housing prices low. Oh man.
I do miss the dirty cells sometimes because a Waffle House. I missed the Waffle House and I was actually able to go back to a Waffle House. Now, y'all want to hear my Waffle House story?
I want to hear your Waffle House order first of all.
Oh, it's the all-star breakfast, chocolate chip waffles, hash browns smothered, covered.
I'm the same, but covered and topped.
I can't do the top. I don't like the tops.
What about you? Do you like the top? You been to Waffle House?
So my mom we dropped my brother off at college in Harrisonburg, Virginia this past weekend.
Okay.
And she asked me, should we go to Waffle House? And I said,
Yes.
absolutely not. The place will be covered in vomit from all the drunken college students, and so we didn't go. We went to IHOP.
Get out.
The blasphemy. The
Okay,
blasphemy
I feel
on
like
the
Waffle House
Southern
is
Fried
good.
Humanitarian podcast.
Waffle House is good, but you can't tell me I'm wrong. There's always
Yes, we
vomit
can.
somewhere.
Yeah.
There's
Yes, we
always
can.
something.
We can tell you you're
Yeah.
wrong because we're doing
Let
that
me ask
right
you this one
now.
question. What time of day was it?
When I've gone to Waffle House.
When was the last time you went to a Waffle
Okay, I've
House?
only been to Waffle House once.
Okay.
What time
And it
of
was
day?
at 11 p.m.
Exactly. There's your up right there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the food was pretty good.
The food is great.
I'll say that. I got a
You don't go to Waffle House for food?
Waffle.
The food is great though.
Oh, yeah, the food brings you back to life after.
Exactly. No,
But you don't go to the Waffle House for food. You go there for the after-night entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. I remember one time I went there and this guy was like, "Yeah, dude, I used to I'm a professional Guitar Hero player." And this was 2018, so it's
Not much of a flex.
That's not a flex, dude. That's not the flex you think that is, dog. Yeah. Also, in the South, there's culturally you have to understand with the Waffle House. It's very it's probably the most important location in a town because severe weather events, the barometer for whether or not you should actually care about the severe weather event, about a tornado. If the Waffle House is closed, then you get out.
Wow.
FEMA actually uses that as an official, thing or sign to show that, it's that serious. Get out. And most people would actually, if the Waffle House closes, that's when they actually get out. They don't care when the government says evacuation order. I lived in the beach town my senior year of college. There was a huge hurricane that actually came through. A lot of people do not, listen to, the FEMA warnings or the governors or the mayor even stating, evacuate now. No one listened. It wasn't until the Waffle House tweeted that they're going to be closed that I heard a bunch of people lose
Exactly.
Wow.
Mhm.
But here's the thing about the Waffle House that I truly enjoy. It's the show you're given while eating your meal.
Yeah.
You would always see your waitress or waiter throwing hands with another patron. You also see your cook outside smoking a cigarette and or also fighting a patron. The moral of the story is if someone's not fighting at Waffle House, it's not going to be a good time.
Yeah.
I enjoy the chaos of Waffle House. I feel like the chaos of Waffle House is very on brand for me, but I don't want to bring my family to Waffle House.
Yes,
You
you
know what
do.
I'm saying?
Waffle House is
I
the
took my
family-
parents to Hooters actually on another road trip a few weeks ago.
So you're gonna go to Hooters, but you ain't gonna go to Waffle House.
Yes.
Hey,
Exactly.
Hooters is a family restaurant, bro.
Hooters is a family restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's something that the whole family can enjoy.
That's true.
Exactly.
But
You know what? You are right. I agree with you. I retract any dissenting opinion I may have had.
about Hooters or Waffle House?
Yes, I never had a dissenting opinion about
Okay,
Waffle
that's
House.
fine.
Let me just say that right there. You know, like I've literally driven through like 3 feet of floodwaters and like to go to a Waffle House at like 3 a.m. I mean, like again, my life was my life going great at the time. Now, the point is, I still did it.
Wow.
Mhm.
I just have so many good memories of the Waffle
Oh
House.
my god!
So many good memories ever since high school. Late nights at Waffle House has been like
Mhm.
a comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. It's the southern place.
Where in the South are you both from, and would you consider Virginia in totality or in part to be the South?
I consider Richmond down to be the South.
Now consider whole Virginia.
You would include like Nova.
Mm-mm.
Really?
Yes. My whole line of where I consider the South is basically every single state that was part of the Confederacy. That's the South.
Culturally, I think that like Nova's more of like, it's more blue than the rest of the South, like significantly.
Doesn't mean the South is all red.
No, I know the South's purple, but like Nova's kind of it's blue in the sense that it has a lot of like DC like commuters who come from there. So people who don't even spend the majority of their time in Nova, they spend it in like DC and Nova. You know,
That's true.
like I don't consider Maryland part of the South,
Yeah, no.
even though Maryland was part of the Confederacy.
I just say Virginia because Virginia was literally the leading state.
Oh yeah, that's why I say Richmond though, because Richmond was the Confederacy capital.
Yeah.
So I say like Richmond down. Yeah, I consider that the South. Because like
But even Richmond itself, it's not really red. It's very much blue.
no, yeah,
Like
well any big
Norfolk
urban
and,
area is
Virginia
blue.
Beach.
You know,
Yeah.
Norfolk, Virginia Beach. Yeah, that's kind of a blue area too. Anyway, so should we go ahead and start the show?
Oh, I didn't get to say my Waffle House story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was just more of me, like, with a bunch of friends, and I was basically talking to them. Because we went there at, like, 2:23 at night,
Mm-hmm.
and literally I was just like, we're ordering food, eating it, and I was like, I miss the Waffle House, but this is not it. I was like, it's too quiet, there's not a lot of people. They were like, what are you expecting? I was like, I don't know, some wild happened. And literally, not 5 minutes after I said that, a whole bunch of people came in, and literally there was a whole twerking competition on the counter. I was like, oh, and then, bro, our waitress joined in. Mind you, our waitress was like in her 40s. And she was trying to teach these young cats about. I ain't gonna lie, she did have a dumpster ass.
No way.
Well, welcome to a very special episode of the Southern Fried Humanitarian Podcast.
The only podcast where your two co-hosts are humanitarian workers from the South exploring regionality and cultural differences, living far away from home.
We also have our special guest today,
The Turkish Knockout! Our good friend, the Turkish Knockout.
Hello. I just want to say I'm honored to be the first guest on this podcast. I feel special. VIP. Thank you all.
That's very true.
So we're
So,
very pleased to have you on the show too.
Thank you.
yeah, it's really cool. So, yeah, I remember, like, you were one of our first, like, I think you actually gave us our first listen.
Yeah, I mean, you did promote the podcast to me, so I felt obliged at first, but then I actually enjoyed everything that was
Basically, day one support. Like, you're day one.
Day zero.
day zero.
Day zero.
Exactly.
Actually, day half, really. Or day -1.
Day negative one.
You
Yeah.
have like a negative day.
You
Very
know,
carefully.
you just do. I mean, time's a construct, so we could.
Yeah.
I mean, then again, our
We do-
construct of time is also based upon physics.
Well, we do socially construct time insofar as we measure, like, our own heartbeats.
Yeah.
But speaking of socially constructed things, the Turkish Knockout. Give us a little background about yourself. Your parents were immigrants, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. My dad's from Turkey. My mom's from Colombia. They met in Northern Virginia, not the South. And yeah, they had me. I grew up in Virginia, and I have one brother. But yeah, I went to school in the North in Pittsburgh, and then I came back, but I'm leaving the country soon to move to Turkey. So that's my
Nice.
background.
And as a queer person, do you feel any sort of, like, trepidation about going to a place that's not it's not very welcoming to. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, this year Turkey was ranked like bottom 2 countries in, I forget what the scope of measurement was. If it was like Europe, Eurasia, something like that. But it was in the bottom 2 for LGBTQ plus friendliness, so to speak. And I think it is a little bit interesting. Like, it does feel, I always say, I want to live in Turkey indefinitely. And the 2 things I could see forcing myself to leave would be, like, politics and, like, if I feel like my queerness is limited in any way living there. So I want to live in Istanbul, which is, like, a really big cosmopolitan city. Probably not going to have a lot of problems there. There will be a smaller community than, like, D.C., New York, whatever. But I would be able to, like, be out, like, have relationships and things like that. But my first year in Turkey, I will be in, like, a smaller, like, beach city, and I think we'll see how it goes. But I think in long term, it'll be okay once I move to, like, the bigger city and, you know, get to test the waters.
Yeah, I do have a question, like, what was your main draw to go to Turkey?
Yeah, so...
I know that your father is from Turkey, so there's, like, that connection, but more so, what is your personal, like, connection to Turkey that made you say, I don't want to pass this up?
Yeah, so when I was little, we went like every other summer. So we alternated between Turkey and Colombia each year. And so when I went to Turkey, I like cried every time I left. So it was like very special to me. I would always go for like a month each, like every other summer. And I guess as I grew up, I really wanted to live there. But it also got complicated because, like, starting in 2015, like, there was a rise in, like, terrorist attacks and then an attempted coup and, like, some bad elections that led to awful leadership. And so, like, in a way, I feel like I am kind of fulfilling a childhood dream by moving to Turkey. But at the same time, I'm a little hesitant because I'm, like, so much has changed that it's like, will this childhood dream pan out the way that I think it's going to? Maybe not. But it's sort of just like, I've always been really drawn to the culture, the people, and so I've always felt like drawn to go and live there.
Well, that's very nice. Honestly, I probably have the opposite experience because every time my parents would visit the motherland, when my parents would take me, like, it was only fun if my dad went.
Okay.
In a sense. If it was with just my mom, she basically wants to do her own thing.
Gotcha.
And so that usually just means going to her friend's house and her catching up with them. But that leaves me basically doing nothing because either those friends didn't really have kids or their kids are gone.
Yeah.
So there was just us just sitting there watching like Indian/UK TV and just being bored our months. Now, granted, when I went, basically anytime I went to go stay with like my dad's side of the family, they always go around and take me and show me some cool
True.
Mom's side did not do that, and literally my mom would take me for 2 months at a time. 2 months doing that you get bored and you hate it. My cousin, like, so me and my siblings have such a, not really distaste or kind of hate it, but we're just like, I don't really want to go. Well, all my other cousins on my dad's side, where when they went, they actually stayed for 1 month, did a bunch of cool shit. And so when they're like, yeah, I want to go back, I'm like,
Yeah, okay, I kind of relate, like, in a way, because a lot of times people will ask me why Turkey and not Colombia. Like, obviously I'm half and half, so why the draw? And I think, like, it's because of, like, what you just said. So, like, when I went to Turkey, we would, like, go traveling, go do, like, fun stuff, you know? And we explored a lot of the country and, you know, all of that. And then in Colombia, a lot of times we would just hang out with family, you know, hang out with my grandparents who are, like, older and, like, less able to do, like, stuff. And so, like, in Colombia, it was always way more, like, boring, so to speak. Like, we didn't do as much and it wasn't as, like, fun. So I feel like that's part of why I always felt a little bit more drawn to Turkey. But now it's weird because now that I'm going to Turkey, I feel like kind of mourning, like, a little bit of a sense of loss with, like, my Hispanic side, because, like, I just feel like I knew Spanish when I was little, but I forgot it, and I'm like, will I ever learn Spanish now? How will I stay connected with that side of things? So I've been listening to a lot of Bad Bunny lately to balance it out, basically. But I relate to you with your experience, like, visiting a country. Like, you know, it depends on, like, how connected you feel and like how much you want to go back.
I completely agree. And honestly, the whole Bad Bunny thing sounds like a whole Gen Z approach to be like, I want to be close to Hispanic culture. You listen to Bad Bunny.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because when we were driving to drop my brother off at school, I was like playing like Bad Bunny's music, and I was like to my mom like, oh, can you like tell me what the song's about? But like every song in like reggaeton is like about like sex and like, you know, like promiscuity, and my mom was like, well, this song is like about whatever, and she would just be like judging me like.
I'm assuming he's over like 18.
Yeah, he's 18.
So at this point, he's gonna know sooner or later, or already knows. So
Yeah.
there's no point in trying to hide it, mom.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I think that's just kind of more of like any sort of parent be like, I don't think I feel comfortable listening to this with my kids.
Yeah.
So a little bit of background on like how we actually know the Turkish knockout here. We cross paths at work. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
Yes.
that is fair to say. Different teams, same office.
Yeah. So we work in. So Prey and I work in employment. We are out here trying to find jobs, and you are in
Casework.
casework.
I love casework, and people think I'm crazy, but I just like the chaos, you know? I like the direct, I mean, employment's also a ton of direct service, but I feel like the chaotic nature of the direct service in casework.
So like for the laymen out there who like who aren't like in tune with the aspects of like humanitarian work, can you like briefly kind of describe what you do in casework?
Yeah, so when refugee clients arrive in the U.S., they get resettled, and then basically everything in the first 90 days, with an asterisk because it's sometimes more, but the first 90 days for initial resettlement period, we do like everything. Like the airport pickup, help them find housing, help them apply to benefits, help them get documentation, etc. You know, and we also like are kind of the anchor, I feel like, because we'll like refer them to other teams, like employment for jobs, youth team for school enrollment. So yeah, that's basically it. Sometimes they're in programs that are longer than 90 days, like 8 months, up to 12 months of helping out clients in the caseworker role. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of what I do.
Any particular moments with a client interaction that stands out to you the most?
I don't know. So I will say my clients and I have a great relationship. I feel like a lot of caseworkers aren't as lucky because clients are humans, right? And like I think people outside of refugee resettlement expect like clients are probably like these really like, you know, grateful people who, and a lot of times they are, but that's, you know, people oversimplify, you know, like they kind of dehumanize clients in a way because clients are what's the word, like dynamic, you know, they're different people who come to the United States.
They kind of overgeneralize.
And they're also
Exactly.
like people under a great deal of stress.
Yes, right.
And
They're
trauma.
dealing with trauma. That's the word
Stress
out
and
of my
trauma.
mouth. They're dealing with so much trauma, so many changes, and also just like a really horrible system where like their Medicaid can take 4+ months. You know, like I would be mad too. And a lot of times they think that we're like the caseworker. Since like I said, we're the anchor. They kind of blame everything on us a lot of the times. So, but I actually have great relationships with my clients. Like they understand when I explain to them like that it's not my fault. So most of my memories are all actually really good. I can't even think of any time I've had like a conflict with a client. So I guess recently I was telling my clients I was leaving, and I have this one client. He came to the U.S. with like a really bad physical ailment, like he had a leg issue, and he hadn't been treated at a refugee camp he had been at for like 7 months. Like they just didn't address it. And so as soon as he got here, he was in the hospital for like 2 weeks, and every day I had to like check in with him and make sure his wife and like 6 kids in the hotel like knew where he was and what was going on. And then he got out, but he had to go to daily appointments for another 2 weeks, and like it was really stressful because I was on call every day, like including weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, for like over a month. And I had my work phone with me everywhere, which is so like typical of casework. But it was just like really stressful. But afterwards, like he just was so grateful, like that someone was there for him, because like I said, for 7 months on this refugee camp, no one was there for him. And so Then I told him I was leaving last week, and he was like, I'm following you to Turkey. He was like, you're not leaving. And that's just, I think, that was a really sweet moment. Because I was like, we bonded, you know, like, I have connected with you, you know, and like...
Y'all were in the trenches together.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you know, like, he's like one of the lucky ones, you know?
Yeah.
Like, for every, like, one guy like that, like, the people who make it here are very lucky, because, like, as we know, like, you know, with the recent humanitarian crises throughout the world, like, and I feel like this kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but, like, I feel like it warrants acknowledgement that, like, not everyone makes it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially, like, with the top of Kabul, like, last year in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were so many people that did not make it on those planes to get over here.
Yeah.
There's still so many that even, like, clients here have asked about, like, what can we do? What can they do to get their family to safety? And it's disheartening to say, like, we don't know.
Yeah. I have clients who are like, you know how, as part of employment, we make budgets. We help clients make budgets. And, like, I have clients like, okay, you should be able to save, like, this amount of money per month. And clients like, yeah, I don't save that money. I send it home immediately.
Yeah.
Because, like, for remittances. Because, like, it's rough out there in Afghanistan.
I just had a client go back to Afghanistan, actually, because...
We had that, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But ours is like, I feel like ours was a little more foolhardy than yours, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, my client, like, I feel bad because his family never got here. Like, he was the only one who came. And then he had kids and a wife and back home. And his wife and I think, like, his daughter got sick, so he decided to go back. And I feel bad because I told him before he left, like, we cannot help you as a resettlement agency, like, get back to the U.S. Like, we don't have that leverage, that power, that insight. And he left, and then he would message me, like, oh, I want to come back. But I'm, like, not even really allowed to talk to him anymore. Like, I have to close his case. Like, he's gone. He's out of the U.S. So it's really hard to, like, know, like, now he's in Afghanistan and he wants to come back, and there's nothing, like, we can do from our position. So, yeah.
That's sad.
But, I mean, like, also, who can blame him because he has family there, you know, like, family's important.
Yeah, I
His
mean,
wife and daughter's there.
yeah, like, you know, you can't, yeah, family kind of keeps it all going, which is part of the reason you want to go to Turkey.
Exactly, and I was just thinking about, like, that, and, like, I think it's a lot of it's, like, a return home, almost. Okay, I think, like, the urge to return home can be so strong. And honestly, I think about that too when I think about the fact that I'm going home, so to speak. I mean, I'm kind of...
Going back to the motherland.
I'm crossed
The
between a
fatherland.
lot of different homes,
Actually,
you know,
technically
like...
the fatherland in your case.
Yeah, the fatherland in my case. But the thing is, like, I think about how that's also such a privilege for me to be able to return home. Like, our clients usually cannot return home. Or if they have that option, it's, like, super perilous, dangerous, whatever. And so I think about that a lot when I, like, tell clients why I'm leaving. I'm like, oh, I'm moving to Turkey to be with family. And, like, then I realize, like, that feels really, like, it feels like a privilege to be able to do that, you know?
It is.
Exactly.
Like, you know, we both, and obviously this is apples and oranges, but since this is the Southern Fried Humanitarian Podcast, we were both back in the South, and I don't know, how does your family, like, view you being here? You're a lot closer than I am to, like, geographically speaking, but, like, for me, I have family who are kind of like they're, like, to where I live is quote unquote the big city, you know, like, it makes people, like, kind of like, my family's like, oh, he's in the big city, he's doing this and that, he's helping these people, he's doing a podcast, that kind of, you know. Yeah. But I'm wondering, like, how your family, like, reacts to that.
I mean, my family loves the fact that I'm in DC.
Yeah.
I mean, it was always kind of like, it was also my dad that kind of, like, got me to push myself to be over here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was, like, after I graduated. I was still staying back in my college town. And I went to go visit them for, like, a weekend. And I was just talking to my pops, and, like, he was like, you know, I thought you probably wanted to, like, leave out of this state. I thought you were trying to, like, get yourself, like, up there. Surprised you haven't done that. I was like, damn, Pops, you're right. The hell I've been doing? And literally the next month I was like, I'm gonna move back home, try to create a network there. Got into a resettlement gang,
Yeah.
And then found an opportunity up in DC, moved up over here. I mean, my parents, like, they know this is a bigger city than back home, but I mean, ours was a big city in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, a lot of the amenities is still kind of true. Like, when you go downtown, it's the same.
Yeah, I'm kind of from a more rural place, so maybe that's it.
Yeah. I mean, not to discredit, like, I did grow up in the suburbs. Let's go to the burbs. Right next to, like, the country rural area. So basically, I had, like, a nice little distance between either wanting to go to the city or going out in the countryside. Usually, I go to the city because what else can you do in the countryside besides go mutton or go, like, the best thing you can do in the countryside is go to the Walmart parking lot.
There's a lot of good stuff out there, man. Like you know, like the part of Louisiana I'm from, like, was real rural, so kind of like, you know, like I would work for my aunt in the summers and like bale hay and like take care of chickens and horses and whatnot. I used to ride Western, so I don't know. I kind of like this. Like to me, is like the big city. You know, I'm like, what the hell?
I don't know, for me, anytime like I went to like someone's like house in the countryside that had like basically horses or any sort of farm animals, they were just there as like pets. They weren't there. They weren't really ranchers or like cow drivers or anything. They were just like, no, we just had a couple of horses, decided to build a stable.
Yeah.
And so that was my like. That's basically where my like city was at. Was in an area where like if people had farm animals, they're not farming.
Oh yeah.
They just have them because they wanted.
No, we were like there are parts of like my town in Louisiana where like you'll see like people like you'll see like you know gangbangers like roll up like on a horse shirtless, which is a hilarious image.
I mean, they really took Lil Nas X's words to
Well, no, it's like that's why like that little Nas X video, but like I've seen that. Like I've seen like just dudes like roll up on like a horse like.
We don't do drive-bys, we do galiots.
Yeah, gallop-bys. What's your gallop-by? But yeah, it's so a little rough around the edges where I'm from, but yeah, it's nothing like Nova and DC.
Yeah.
And
See, I think I'm abnormal in that I think DC is too slow of a city for me. I know. Well, it's because like growing up, I would go to like Istanbul, like I said, you know, like on occasion every other year. And Istanbul's really fast, you know, like New York type of speed, you know? And I crave that. Like I crave the chaos. Like I said before, chaos is something I really am drawn to, you know? So
How many
that's
people are
why.
in Istanbul?
What do you say?
How many people are in Istanbul?
A lot. I don't know, millions.
I think it's like 3
millions.
times the size of DC. That's what I would wager.
But Istanbul's such a weird city. I mean, I say that like in a positive way.
Ooh,
Because,
there's actually more than 15 million.
yeah,
Oh, I think I was right.
it's
So,
good.
What
But
else is new?
the thing about Istanbul is like it's like really hectic, kind of like New York, but people are really relaxed. Like it's a Mediterranean chillness, right? So like it's a weird dynamic of like there's a lot going on, but people are also super just like laid back. But I feel like DC's too slow for me. I don't know why. Also the type of people in DC, no hate, but I feel like there's like a lot of people have like a finance bro complex. You know?
No, they have a government bro.
Government bro
Yeah.
complex, and like I feel like in high school I was someone, you know, growing up in this area who had a government bro complex. But I grew up, and people in DC don't grow out of that a lot of times.
Oh my God, yeah, like the Republican Autonomous Zone of Navy
Yes,
Yard.
Navy Yard. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like,
Or like how everyone always likes to brag about their security clearance level.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I have top secret security clearance. Did you really be telling me this at a random bar?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you don't have it if you're freely just giving this information out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why, like, I feel so bad for the single folks in DC.
I feel bad for me.
I feel bad for you. I do. I genuinely
I
do
feel
feel bad for you. Or dating is kind of a nightmare in DC,
Yeah.
from what I can tell.
Everyone has the same personality, and it's like if you don't like that personality, then like you're not gonna have luck in DC.
Yeah, if you're like from here, it's different. I feel, but like the people that move here, like people move to LA to be actors. People move to New York to be in business. People move to DC to be sociopaths. I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Like. Mm-hmm.
It's just people who are trying to get a strive for power.
They're just like, I have to. The federal government literally cannot run without me.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like that person's job is like to keep the senator away from preschools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of get from your angle because, like, you lived here your whole entire life, so
Yeah.
of course it'd be like, I've been there, done that.
Mhm.
You kind of grew out of it.
No, that's true. I find people who like were born and raised here, like, are more likely to not like it. But that's, I feel like, true of anywhere, right? Like,
Exactly, because like a lot of people I know, especially back home, there's always two kinds of people: those who leave their home like during college and either like never move back, or those who just move back and be able and just start their lives there.
yeah, when I moved back here, I told myself, so I moved back here from college in December for my job, and then I told myself that by the following December, I had to be gone, because I, like, don't like DC, and I knew if I was here longer than a year, like, I would be, like, settling, like, per my preferences. Like, it wouldn't make sense for me to be here longer than that. So I was, like, by the following December, I, like, had to be out, basically.
Yeah.
So what state were you in college in?
Pennsylvania.
Okay. Oh yeah, Pittsburgh. Duh.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Loved it.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's my favorite U.S. city.
Really?
Yeah, I love, like, it's very much a
Philly?
working class. Yes, it's a very okay. Philly has some of the same qualities, but Pittsburgh is just such like a working class city. Like, like it's like now. Okay, I was
didn't
gonna
see
say.
Wiz Khalifa. It is not worth it.
I was gonna
Okay.
say also, like, Pittsburgh is like
Point is, Philly has a lot more of an edge to it than Pittsburgh, I feel.
well, Philly has, like, okay, both cities have actually really strong activist cultures. And, like, I was a community organizer in Pittsburgh, mostly doing, like, climate-related work. But Philly has a larger, like, activist, like, what's the word? Like, community, so to speak. And I really admire that about Philly. But something about Pittsburgh, it gives, like, friendly neighborhood vibes, And I was gonna say it's a very livable city, but then I realized that Pittsburgh is actually ranked like one of the least livable cities for Black women in the U.S. Meanwhile, it's ranked one of the most livable cities in general in the U.S., which I think really shows. But there's a lot of racial disparity in Pittsburgh, and just
That's
a lot
something
of
we talk
stuff
a lot
that goes
about
on
in
there.
talk.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've talked about this before, but like how like a lot of the civil rights legislature was aimed at the South.
Yeah.
And so, or legislation, sorry. And as a result, like, the South is actually more integrated than a lot of northern cities. Like, Pittsburgh.
Granted, there's still a lot of resistance towards it, but again, more so than like up north and out west and the Midwest as well.
Oh, yeah, people aren't willing to acknowledge it. That's the thing. That's the
So
thing.
we had to basically be forced to acknowledge it.
Yeah, and we did. To our credit, we did.
Yeah.
But, we have,
Although
like...
there's still like literally when I was driving down to NC,
Mm-hmm.
there was a national park service for the site of Stonewall Jackson's death, and I'm just like, why is that a national park site?
Mm-hmm.
He is literally a traitor.
Yeah, I don't know. I never got the Confederacy. Like, why would you associate yourself with losers?
Bird up.
You know what I mean?
That's
The
fair.
losers decided to rewrite history.
Yeah. So, okay, that'll take us to. I think that should take us to halftime. Yeah.
Can take us to that.
Yeah, we back here. So, Turkish knockout. I wanted to talk to you here. Although that name's pretty bad.
Thank you.
I would
like it.
I think whoever came up with that is really handsome. Okay, so you've discussed previously kind of your queer identity. I wanted to sort of circle back and see to that topic and so as a queer person moving to Turkey, what do you think how do you think that is going to inform your identity? Do you think you'll sort of wear that kind of on your sleeve as you get there, or do you think, or how do you intend to reconcile?
Yeah, that's a great question because I am someone who's I really am ardent and really passionate about radical queerness. I really my phone background is poster from the AIDS movement in the U.S. and AIDS activism.
Mm-hmm.
It literally says calling all queers. A lot of the stuff I like is very queer. I center that in my identity and in my life. And so I think that is an interesting thing to consider. I don't know yet. I think I'll be a little bit more reserved with telling people just because I kind of want to feel people out first. And I think that might be a little bit hard for me in some ways, but also I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I I think with like gender identity, I'm actually really excited because in Turkish, the only pronoun is like the third person they, right? And like
Really?
my pronouns are they them. So I'm actually really excited for that because like when speaking in Turkish, like it's literally impossible for anyone to misgender me. Like it can't happen. It can't happen. So that's really exciting for me.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the words for like spouse and like instead of like wife husband, it's like there's one word for like spouse. So like I remember I did the study abroad program where I was learning Turkish. It was in Azerbaijan though, but my classmate like kept talking about his significant other, his husband, who we didn't realize was a husband at the time, because he just kept saying like the word for spouse. And then like halfway through the program, we found out he was also queer, and like my friends and I, we were all queer, we were like, wow, we didn't know this. So that just shows like language is actually really helpful, like in being a little bit more covert. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we all have these we are always like kind of telling stories about ourselves, like I guess to ourselves sort of. And so when you are sort of existing, do you consider or not exist, like that's kind of a weird way to say it, but like do you consider yourself an American first? Do you consider yourself a queer person first? Do you consider yourself like a person of Turkish descent first, or a person of like Colombian descent first? Like which identity is most like congruent to like you?
Yeah. That's interesting. So I would say like being
and do you think that'll change as you like sort of as you age out, as you get like as you move across the world? Do you think that'll
I feel like for me it's always like being a first generation American / child of immigrants has been really a prominent role in my life, and being queer. So those two things have kind of been my main defining qualities, I guess. I feel like I have never really felt super in tune with being an American. Like I know I'm an American, I understand I have a lot of privileges with that, and I know I'm well positioned because I'm an American, but I've never felt like a strong attachment to America. Like from a young age, I thought I might want to leave, and my parents were very accepting of that because they moved here, so they knew what it's like to move away from your country of birth when you grow up. So yeah, I to answer the question, I think queerness will always be a leading identity for me, and I think being multicultural will always be a leading identity for me. And like I said earlier, I feel a little worried that like living in Turkey, I might drift a little bit further away from like my Hispanic background. But I think like as long as I'm like intentional about like maintaining connection and hopefully relearning Spanish one day and all of that, I think it won't be a problem. I think I'll always have like a lot of respect for all sides of my background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't forget, you can always listen to Bad Bunny, dude.
Exactly.
But no, I was also kind of thinking because like it seems very much like the opposite. Because like when I ever brought up like leaving the U.S., my parents were like, which country though?
So that's something I feel like there's like, are your parents immigrants or okay? I feel like there's two types of immigrant parents. This is really an oversimplification, but I've noticed from like my friends who are also first generation Americans, either there's the child of immigrants, second generation American. I feel like immigrant parents, there's immigrant parents who are like, we made the American dream, stay in America, and then there's immigrant parents who are like, we moved, so we get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
my parents love America actually, like they really love it, but they also like don't feel like they don't expect me to stay in America. They just don't really mind.
Well, they're loyal to what makes their child happy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, because like from context, and again, this is pure conjecture, but the sense I'm getting is that your parents were very accepting when you came out to them.
No.
Okay, I was
not
wrong.
Not at all. No.
Wow, that was a swing and a fucking miss.
No, I think that's good. I think it's good to get it on, like discuss that too, because like I think my parents are accepting in a lot of ways, and they're accepting now of my sexuality. They don't know about my gender identity. It's not worth unpacking with them. But yeah, it's just parents. But no, my parents, I thought they'd be more accepting, and they just were a little like, how
Yeah,
parents have dreams, right?
especially with like immigrant parents, because in my view, like honestly, it took me a while to realize that my parents were actually the most progressive of immigrant parents, especially
Yeah.
in my family.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of my cousins, they would come out as they would be do things that were outside of cultural norms.
I think
But there's still a cultural issue because like sometimes my parents, it takes them a while to really like understand it. Like they're not the type of ones to actually want to do anything to like stop them, but they're just they're ignorant sometimes. They just don't understand it and just like you had to explain it to them.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of like that with especially like your parents being so like again like yeah accepting in their own way and kind of like transitioning a little bit. I don't want to.
Oh, go.
Yeah, so basically like kind of the idea of like the foundation of this country is based on people who left their hometown for voluntarily or involuntarily, but the country was built on folks who like left their hometown, and I think that kind of like makes it kind of like in a weird way, it like kind of allows you to kind of pursue your own version of an American dream that's actually outside of America. Does that make any sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so that's why I think a lot of like you two are some of the most like politically like active people I know, and
Crazy when you say that living in DC.
I know exactly. And so I wanted to talk a little bit. I wanted to discuss with you a little bit more about like your activist work and how like these like identities that like inform your personality, how that informs your activism work, and what that looks like, just sort of, or what that did look like and what it continues to look like.
Yeah, so I guess like growing up, I'm growing up in this area. There were like a lot of like protests about varying issues, so I was always pretty like aware of different social issues. And then in like my senior year, I got involved a little bit with some organizing in DC, but it wasn't as prevalent as when I went to college. In college, I started learning more about the climate crisis, and there was like a growing movement of like youth climate activists. So I got involved doing climate organizing in Pittsburgh and also like just in Pennsylvania more broadly. And I think like being half Turkish, half Colombian really informed that, because there's a lot of effects of the climate crisis already showing, all over the world, but in Turkey and Colombia, there's like a lot of like natural disaster type stuff. And also in like Colombia was ranked the deadliest country for climate activists actually recently. And so I think just like knowing how the climate crisis has not only affected the motherland and fatherland, but also like the suppression of people who are doing important climate work in those countries, especially Colombia, has made me feel more driven to do that work here in the U.S. because I have like more of the freedom to do so. So I think that's kind of driven my activism in a way, and I think my activism has driven my identity as well. Like I feel like in activist groups, people are very like progressive, and there's a lot of acknowledgement of issues of like decoloniality and like queer liberation and like all these things that have helped me understand the expansiveness of like gender and sexuality and identity in general. And I think that's played like a huge role in me being able to define my gender identity, my sexuality, and yeah, all of that.
That's very interesting. I think one of the questions I wanted to ask is like, we've kind of talked about this before. You half like Turkish, half Colombian. So what was that upbringing like with a Turkish father, a Colombian mother, and like the influence you got from both their sides, their cultures, their ethnicities, and just also living here? I mean, granted, you guys don't think Nova is the South, but I still consider it the South. So what was all that like, including like coming to terms with your own gender identity?
Yeah, I would say growing up, I felt, I don't know, I think like both Turkish and Colombian culture are very gendered, like exceptionally gendered. And so like I feel like there were gender expectations on both sides. But I also like kind of, I don't know, I always say I came out of the womb queer. I mean, obviously, if you're queer, you come out of the womb queer. But I came out of the womb like knowing I was queer. Maybe not knowing I was like gender queer yet, but I knew I was queer. Okay, so like I always kind of subverted in some way, shape, or form from a young age, you know. And so I don't know. It was interesting, and I think I did face a lot of like expectations and sort of like, you know, yeah, gender expectations. But I also never was someone who like really, I don't know, gave into those expectations. Like I
forced
felt
upon you, like
in a way, but also like not exceptionally. I don't know. It was like I could tell there were these expectations for me, but from a young age, I was like, I never want kids. Like, and like I never want like this heteronormative nuclear family situation. And like even though I didn't yet know that those things related to my understanding of my gender, I mean like those things I knew from a young age, and I would like tell my parents, and like they knew from a young age, although they were like, oh, you'll grow out of it. They were like, okay, you don't want kids, sure. And now I'm like 23 and I'm like, yeah, I definitely still don't want kids. Like, you know, I still like, I'm not gonna marry a man, I'm not gonna have kids, like that's not in my plan, right? And so yeah, but I would say like it was interesting growing up like in that dynamic, you know. I don't know if like where I grew up, like I don't know if growing up in Nova specifically had that much of an impact. I think it was mostly like parental expectations from like their immigrant backgrounds. I think maybe I had a little more freedom to express myself how I wanted, like living in Nova. Like I think my parents understood we live in like a progressive area, so like they had more leniency with me.
So you think like if you'd grown up, say, in rural Louisiana, where, you know, there's kind of like, you're sort of kind of in a fishbowl as an immigrant, you think that like that would have maybe informed you differently? You would have been like, you would have felt more of a part in like schools and social settings? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it would have definitely been different for sure. Like I think there would have been additional pressure like to fit within a status quo or within a mold. Whereas like I feel like I did have a lot of agency growing up around here to be a little more expressive.
Yeah, so you think you had more agency here to be expressive, is that fair?
Yeah.
So what I'm interested, and we've talked about this before, but like this is a really like fascinating thing. Like I really am fascinated to see like the agency of like the children of like our clients and how that's going to play out over the next decade or so. And you know, so as a queer person, like, do you think that and you're working with clients, like, can you give us some like, do you have any stories about like working with clients where you can sort of connect with them on the level of like not only of like, hey, I have this background, or I have a similar background, like my parents were here, I know about this stuff, but also like I'm also a queer person, and I can tell or maybe not like I can tell you're a queer person, but like you know what I mean, right? Yeah, you know what I'm going at.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So this is really timely because yesterday there's like a Pride employee resource group where we work, and in that resource group we had a meeting the other day about like being what we called out-ish at work, where you're like out, but like maybe you're not necessarily like, you don't think your coworkers necessarily understand your identities, or like, you know, it's just not like, it's hard to be out at work, you know, for whatever reason. So we had discussions about that, and we talked about how like there's not enough top-down training from like leadership at most nonprofits, but because a lot of times an excuse is like, oh, well, clients won't understand that. Like, they don't know the language for that. They're not going to understand what it means to be queer or to be, you know, gender nonconforming. But in reality, we definitely have clients who, first of all, I think it's, what's the word, like, infantilizing to assume that, like, a client wouldn't be able to grasp that. Like, they're adults. So, like, I mean. But also, like, someone said in the meeting, like, some of these clients are probably people who could be queer themselves but never had like the ability to discuss that, to explore that, and also being queer, like queerness is like a large part of American culture, right? So like to be integrated into American culture, it's important to understand and, you know, gain a tolerance for, you know, for queer people. So I think it's yeah, I think that's one side of it, right? But from personal anecdotes, like I used to work at this nonprofit where basically I came in and they had done some like LGBTQ plus training, but I started working with some students because I was working with high schoolers and middle schoolers. I had some students who were gender nonconforming. One student was really similar to me in that they were Kurdish, so like similar, you know, like background.
Yeah, geographic.
Yeah, geographics. And they were non-binary, using they, them pronouns. And I realized like there weren't really policies in place for like how we like address students in front of like their parents, or like how we asked certain like demographic questions to students when enrolling them in like summer camp and like stuff like that. Like it was just like there wasn't a lot of consideration for like inclusive policies that like would minimize like discomfort for the students and like things like that. And so I realized like there needed to be more of that, and there needed to be more like number one, inclusive policies, number two, staff training, and number three, just like spaces for like queer immigrants, and especially in that role, queer immigrant youth, to like thrive and express themselves. So like I started like the queer youth space at that organization, and that was really a great experience. But I think just like working with like queer youth, like queer immigrant youth, was like such an informative experience. And then in my current role, like I haven't worked with anyone who I know is queer, like in my current role.
As a client.
As a client, yeah. And so I think like I usually don't like necessarily like broach the topic, just like because it hasn't really come up with clients. But I feel like going back to the idea that like I feel like clients have the capacity to definitely understand like LGBTQ plus discourse, and I feel like it shouldn't be something that's ever like shied away from. So yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to like tuck it away.
Exactly.
Now, at times, like you said before, clients were raised in an environment where like even if they were queer, they couldn't really like express that outwardly or even share that with anybody without any sort of repercussions. So here they actually would have a better brave space to actually, you know, share that out with people they feel comfortable with. And you know, here I feel like granted, my gendered self cannot like fathom this, but like I feel like it's more like at least our generation is more tolerable for non-binary gender formalities.
Yeah.
So we've kind of like had a more open like perspective of what gender really means.
I mean, we're just talking about it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, but my other point is that there are clients who were, you know, the reason why they had to lead was because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity, because they were outspoken. They didn't want to be like shut down because of their society. That it's them, take it or leave it, and apparently they just.
Yeah.
So how do you think that? So my next question for you is like, how does this like, how would you say this looks for this information, this not information, but these like this discourse, this identity, and your experience through client relations, your activism. How, and we take all that and now we put it in you, we put it in Turkey. What does it look like going there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I mean, I do want to continue doing refugee resettlement work in Turkey. And I think that it's, you know, all of this will kind of transfer over to there. And I think it'll be harder in a way to do this work there and to have these conversations because it's less of a queer inclusive country as of now. But I still think it's, I don't know, I think like my goal in life is to do kind of like cross-cultural and cross-country work, doing like LGBTQ plus inclusive resettlement or, you know, education or integration programs for queer refugees and immigrants. Mm-hmm. So I think part of that work will include like creating those spaces in Turkey for like open expression and inclusion and just trying to make it a better place for queer migrants. But that's not just in Turkey. Like I'd love to see that happen elsewhere also, like more on an international scale. But that's, you know, it's also like kind of a tall order, but we'll see how it goes.
I mean, you know what we say in the South, and you wouldn't know this because you're from Nova. We say, how you eat that big old horse? One piece at a time.
Wow, that's wise. Thank you.
That's some stuff there. Please join me again in thanking the Turkish Knockout for being our guest this evening.
Thanks for
Absolutely.
having me.
Let's give a big shout out to Turkish Knockout. They've been very gracious to, grace us with their presence.
Of course, anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, keep listening.
Listening.
Keep listening. Remember to subscribe, listen to the podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Y'all be good, you hear?
Y'all be good.